very good. Yeah, I'm happy that we have this new format. This is much more technical than it used to be in the past. We want to have a focused technical, a topic list here whenever we have these calls. That's basically also what I wanted to reinforce here today. As some of you, or as hopefully all of you know, we had set out last year that we would increase the amount of technical information, restructure a bit, make it more available. Now this is the next step here. Mel will elaborate on some of the fairly sizable work that they have been doing, his team and himself, and we really want to make this a format here that lines up with with the developer community, and also serves as the forum to inform you and discuss basically some of the activities that are going to be focused around developers. So we're planning on having a few events, possibly even in-person events for the core group of developers, which I would assume most of the people that are here count on, so are included. So I think that's all I wanted to say. This should really be about developers and frameworks and content.
Great, thank you, Ralph. I'd like to hand it over to Mel, who is head of our developer relations, and I believe, Mel, you have a couple of slides to share for the community as well. If you want to go through those, I'll hand it over to you.
So, yes, thank you. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name is Mel Padden. I'm your developer relations point of contact here for Casper. What we've been working on for the last few months really is the main point of focus for us has been the ODRA framework. The ODRA framework is, for those of you who don't know, I think most of you should know. It is a framework for developing smart contracts on the Casper platform, and it is essentially built using what we call best practices to make it a lot less frictionful to develop smart contracts. Now, it's been through several releases over the last few months. Most of the releases over the last few months have been additional features, but the last release, which we're about to release, 1.0, is essentially bug fixes and additional documentation. This is due to second week in May. This is good. As I said, bug fixes and enhanced documentation are part of this release. The enhanced documentation, by the way, is not simply what you would call reference documentation, the kind of thing you're used to viewing and just for reference. We're talking about tutorials and worked examples, which make it easier and more obvious what the use cases are for ODRA, and how to implement ODRA, to use ODRA to develop your smart contracts. There's a full change set at this URL. The current release is 0.9.1, which already contains quite a few updates. And one of the most significant updates is a smart contract metadata generation. Now, why is this significant? The smart contract metadata has been one of the things which we have been repeatedly asked for, and we have been agitating to get into this framework and to get into the landscape for some time, because it enables a bunch of follow-on features. What it really means is when you build a contract on ODRA, among the benefits you get, apart from the fact that it's just simpler and easier to develop smart contracts on ODRA, it removes a lot of the friction points, as I said, without getting into, this is not the forum to get into the specifics of the exact implementation of these features and exactly how they work, and that would be a little bit too fine-grained, I imagine. But it removes some repetitive code, and it follows a format for smart contracts building compared to the existing Casper API. But in addition to this, you get the benefit of smart contract metadata generation, which when you build an ODRA contract, you get a JSON schema which describes the contract itself. We can then use this, and we are designing tools right now to leverage this metadata generation to simplify and make it to give you a fuller feature set of tools which you can use for developing Casper smart contracts. particularly for local nets. There are other tools which are in development, which right now, at the current iteration of these tools, does not necessarily use the smart contract metadata, but it is envisioned, excuse me, it is envisioned that they will. And as I said, the design work for that is in process right now. But if you have not yet checked out ODRA, I advise you to check it out now. There has never been a better time than right now. We're planning a big release for the consensus conference at the end of May. And the last release, 091, it implemented the SEP 18 and SEP 78 in the ODRA modules, which ODRA modules are essentially reusable pieces of code, which make it, again, it's all about reducing friction, which makes it friction-free to reuse the Open Zeppelin standards are in the ODRA modules right now, as I understand it, and there will be further additions to the ODRA modules to form a consistent way to provide reusable code modules to our smart contract developer universe or community. As I say, a launch is planned for consensus at Austin, and we're very much looking forward to that. And the project is actually on schedule, so we don't foresee any issues with that. As I said, the current release is basically bug fixes, small bug fixes, and documentation improvements. So there are no foreseeable blockers to the consensus Austin launch happening as scheduled. SDKs, yeah. So okay, so SDKs, the various SDKs that we have been that we are maintaining. One of the current jobs which we are working on is essentially upgrading them, making them ready for the move to Casper 2.0, which is coming very soon. Java, current version is 2.5.4. It's one of the more advanced SDK numbers. As you can see from the notes, there's some fairly minor bugs fixed in the latest releases. What the guys have been focusing on in the last few releases have been improvements to the serialization, ironing out wrinkles in the way the SDK does serialization with respect to the node, specifically with nested complex types. So those of you who have been running into problems because of those very, very specific issues, it must be said, you should find that those issues have been addressed in the recent releases. Python SDK has been through a few updates recently, and again, the main drive for the Python SDK has been to make it ready for Casper 2.0 integration through a lot of internal refactoring. So not a lot of new features to be it must be said, in the latest iteration of the Python SDK, but there are quite a lot of non-functional improvements. A similar case with the .NET SDK, just keeping it up to date with the Casper node and some dependency updates. The TypeScript SDK hasn't had a great deal of updates to it recently, but that's because there is a major rewrite in progress. So basically nothing right now, but there will be some major updates in future community calls to do with the TypeScript SDK. There's the Golang SDK, again, there's not a lot to report except for keeping it up to date with the Casper node software. Let me move on to tooling. One of the things which we've been looking at and really trying to improve is the richness of the tooling that you guys have to work with on Casper. When you choose to develop on Casper, the support that you get from the tooling. There is already, as you know, existing NCTL utility, which allows you to spool up a local Casper cluster. There has been a reworking of it. There were some. The motivation for doing this reworking and calling it CCTL was essentially that internally it was felt that we wanted to add some things, and it was to do so, it was important to improve the internal structure of the code. There have been additional commands added to look at CCTL yourself. I encourage you to go to check out the GitHub repository and take it for a test spin. You'll find it operates pretty much the same as NCTL with some additional improvements. So again, that's an update which you may be interested in. I mean, if you're still working with NCTL, there's nothing particularly wrong with that, but you may wish to go over and check out CCTL. Fondant. Yeah. So again, one of the motivations for Fondant is to give you a richer experience as you develop on Casper. And Fondant is a tool which is very obviously inspired by some other tools in ecosystems on other chains, and it is in beta version right now. So it's a user interface which allows you to visually run NCTL clusters on your local machine for the purposes of local testing. So again, the overarching motivation behind all of these changes is just to make it easier and less frictionful, particularly for rapid development of smart contract-based applications, where you're going to be testing it locally, maybe moving to testnet and eventually to mainnet. But the first thing that you're going to be doing is writing a smart contract and trying to test it somehow, and how to make it easier to get to those points. So again, I encourage you to go and check out Fondant if you're interested in it. It's available in beta version. Again, I would stress that right now the feature set of Fondant is it's still useful. It's still useful in its current form, but there's a hell of a lot that we're intending to put onto it, and the smart contract metadata is going to enable some of that. But just to emphasize that it's there now, it's useful. I would recommend that you check it out to see how you can integrate it into your workflow and to improve your workflow. Terminus. The motivation behind Terminus was essentially to provide a standardized test framework for ensuring the quality of all SDKs. Now, why do we need this? Or why should you be interested in it? Well, you should be interested in it from the point of view of making sure that whatever code you're running conforms to a certain baseline level of quality. So if for some reason you feel, we've sometimes had this experience where I'm working with an SDK and I'm not really sure if it's doing what it's supposed to do. Well, you could always download the standard SDK tests utility and run those, and you could be assured that the SDK that you're working with is up to quality. But the real reason for developing this framework is, as you know, we're moving towards Casper 2.0, and these SDKs are going to need to be updated. And this gives us the confidence that we can make rapid refactorings and rapid changes to the SDK, and have clarity about what's changed, and have confidence that we have maintained quality going forward. So it's a big step forward. It's implemented across the big 5 SDKs. And if you are of a mind to develop an SDK in whatever language you want, then the guys who develop Terminus are happy to give you any assistance you need in order to integrate it into your project, which again has obvious benefits for any prospective SDK that you're developing. And also there's a fair degree of documentation in that GitHub repository itself. I mean, I've looked at it. It's not trivial, but it's not impossible either for a skilled developer to simply take Terminus and integrate it into a new SDK and just run with that. There's also a huge amount of knowledge built into the Terminus integration to the 5 SDKs that I've mentioned already. So if you're looking for examples of things, how to call a specific Node API function, then that's a good repository of knowledge for you to go and have a look at. And so that's another benefit of the Terminus project. Those are the main updates from the DevRel side, and in terms of the tooling that we've been developing. But the other work that we've been doing is we've been developing a series of tutorials specifically to do with the ODRA framework. There's been a fair degree of work done on that, which we will be publishing very soon. Some videos, articles. Our very own Mr. Dylan Ireland is working on season 2 of his Daft Developer series, which he will be publishing on YouTube at some point in the near future. And that's just walking you through the use of these new features and bringing you up to speed with the prospective use case. the way we're going to release things for now is going to be on the Telegram channel. There is going to be a Discord relaunch at some point, and we will be engaging with that as well. But for now, Telegram is probably the easiest way to reach you guys, and it's also the easiest way to reach me, as it happens. So if you guys have any questions about any of this, there's your point of contact. You can email me or Telegram me at any point, and here to answer all of your questions. So I'll leave it at that, and happy to answer questions, or just simply hand it back to Joe at this point.
Great. Thank you, Mel. We do have a question in the chat here. Someone is asking Manny, Fondant Dev also supporting or using CCTL with the 1.1 version now? That's a question.
As far as I'm aware, it's not. I haven't checked 1.1 yet, but that is on my list of things to do early next week. My information is that and as far as I'm aware, the Fondant at the moment relies on a Dockerized version of NCTL, but there's no reason why it couldn't use CCTL, and it probably will move to CCTL fairly shortly.
Okay. I don't know if you can see the in-call messages, Mel. I'll just read it out here. But will the transforms within deploys ever been? Has it ever been publicly documented? There are a few cases which make it requirement to read the transforms.
Been publicly documented. The schema is within the deploys. I'm not sure I'm not sure who would answer that particular question. I think that might be one for Ed at some point.
Deploy transforms are not within deploys. So deploys, when executed, we produce the database change log, which are the transformations of state between the pre-state to the post-state, and they are metadata that is provided independently as a consequence of execution of the deploy, right? So when you do like a git deploy, what you're getting is an aggregate of the deploy that you sent, and if it's been processed, the transformations that resulted from the execution of it. They should all be documented. This is all very basic systemic function. So I would expect that the official documentation should cover them. If it doesn't, then it's a gap and it should be filled, right? But in the code, the transformations are essentially an enum, and the Rust documentation describes each of the transforms, what they do. They're all very verb-based, so it should be fairly clear. You know, the add transform adds things, the write transform writes things. So basically, yeah, I would expect the official documentation to have some coverage. If not, the Rust documentation surely does, and if not, the logic is pretty straightforward. It's just a single enum with some variants in it, and they have pretty clearly named verbs. So I suppose the better question would be, to what extent is there mystery? Like, is there some purpose that wants to look at the transforms and is unable to follow the flow or understand the semantics, versus whether or not it's understood what add means? Yeah. So could I get like a more targeted question?
So Ed, I don't know if you can see, but in the in-call messages, he gets a little bit more specific there. The use cases detect delegates, undelegate, etc. when they're not done by calling the entry point, but via not done by calling the entry point, but via a smart contract.
So it should be true today, and I believe it's true, is that you must, to delegate or undelegate, it should be coming directly from the account, because it's all tied to the public key of the account. I do not think it's possible to delegate and undelegate from a contract, off the top of my head. So you should never need, it should never be mysterious if a contract called caused a delegation or undelegate. If you are using WASM, you pass WASM to do the undelegate operation, which, you know, a lot of tools do. Then that's not a smart contract. That's session logic that's executing within the context of the account that sent it, right? Not a smart contract. So yeah, I mean, maybe there's more clarification, but I don't even think that's a thing.
I think also the structure of the data in the auction pre 2.0 makes it a little bit more challenging to identify a specific public key, right? I mean, we're restructuring the auction as part of 2.0, and I think that will make it a little bit more ergonomic to figure out, basically getting auction info from the auction, right?
Well, probably. Let's just keep these things clear though, right?
Yeah.
So if you're looking, I guess the thing is, what problem are you trying to solve? If you are looking at the transforms to look to see whether or not a delegation or undelegation occurred by a smart contract, what I'm saying is that shouldn't be a thing, because I'm pretty confident that the delegate and undelegate, all of the stake management is tied to an account, because under the hood, since that's all consensus bearing information, it's all tied to public keys, which are only associated with accounts. Independently of that, if you're saying what I really want to do is see the state of the auction, well, then you really shouldn't be trying to like sift through transform to determine that. You should be interacting directly with the auction. Like the state of the auction itself records all that.
Yeah, that's right.
That's right. So if again, it just basically comes to what problem you're trying to solve, because if understanding the problem you're trying to solve, there's probably a more direct way to solve it than trying to like sift through the transforms. The transforms are really just the change log. They just represent, from this pre-state hash to the post-state hash that was generated as a consequence of executing this. These are the specific changes that were made to global state, whether it's a newly written record that didn't exist before, or a pre-existing piece of information that is being adjusted in some way, transformed. That's what the term refers to, and that's really only incidentally interesting if you're trying to follow specific micro flows. If you're looking at more of like a large scale, what does this all mean? What's the end state of this? Particularly when you're dealing with something like a system contract where there's business logic, the far better way to get that information is just go directly after that auction data, which we do provide, like all of the bids, all of the stakes, all of the snapshot of era over era, who are the winners, what is their stake, etc. So I would suggest that is probably what you should be doing.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yep. Thanks, Ed.
Excellent. Thank you. And thank you, Mel, for sharing the presentation in the chat here. Mel has shared the document, also a link to his personal Telegram. We'll also share the Dev Connect Telegram channel for those of you that want to join in more detail here shortly. But I'd like to hand it over to Mel.
Actually, so Manny's continued to post up. I just glanced at the messages. Sure. So what I would say is maybe the takeaway is the workings of the auction may not be fully documented or understood, and maybe that would be a place where some additional documentation would be useful to describe, what it is, how the data of all of the stake is managed. And so just share like understanding of that and what resources are already available, which I think would cover people's needs. And if not, if it's like, yeah, given all that, understanding what it is and what data is available, there's still some gap, then we could have a targeted conversation from like a common point of understanding. So I believe that the documentation around the auction does describe like the high level notion. Maybe there's sort of an intermediate level of like the sort of translation into, well, what does this mean, that could be provided. That might be helpful.
Excellent. Thanks for the question, Manny, and thanks, Ed and Medha, for clarifying. Also have dropped the new link here for additional questions that we'll be able to save after the call, and we'll be able to get to those later as well. So if those of you have questions, you can drop those in the link that we provided here in the chat. So that's a transition now to Medha to give us an update on the core protocol. There's a lot going on, a lot of development, and Medha, I'll hand it over to you to update us on any developments that you can share with the community here.
So on the core protocol development, we are fully focused on, now development's done. The 2.0 node has come together. We are able to run networks on it. We're doing a lot of testing, under engineering testing specifically. We're also focused on packaging up the entire node package and the sidecar. So some of the key things to highlight with 2.0 when we think about, what are some of the really big changes in 2.0? One of the big changes is that we're pushing the RPC out of the node into a separate process and a sidecar process, right? So you guys have probably heard a little bit about this notion of an event sidecar. And our reasoning for doing that is very much around a desire to be able to iterate more rapidly on the reporting piece. When you talk about reporting, you're talking about, the information that we use to build things like the, CSPR.live block explorer, or a rendering of the information that's coming off of the blockchain for your application. We think about reporting. That's how at least Ed and I think about it. And what we want to be able to do is to be able to rapidly iterate on those reporting changes without having to do a protocol release. So the purpose of one of the big breaking changes in 2.0 is this pushing of the RPC out of the node into the event sidecar. And that will enable us to make changes to reporting without upgrading the protocol, right? Because we have to consider, when you change the underlying protocol, that is a big undertaking, right? And the reporting piece is separate from the underlying protocol itself. So that's one of the big things that happens. And we will need to package that up and provide that for those validators and dApp developers and exchanges that need to have that reporting, kind of like, I want to say 2.0 backwards compatibility, right? So there's going to be a new binary port, and then the sidecar will connect to it and provide a stream of data that's going to look very similar, not exactly the same, but very, very similar to the 1.x Casper, 15156, I think is the current version, Peregrine, Casper Peregrine. And this will enable, the JavaScript SDK to communicate with the Casper 2.0 with minimal lift, right? And so kind of pivoting into, the SDK is a key piece of load-bearing infrastructure. The team is actively working on getting the 2.0 changes into the JavaScript SDK. My expectation is sometime end of next week, we should have a version of the JS SDK, and we will be providing that to specific folks in the community, the ODRA.dev folks, Killian probably, and Make Services. We want to keep this initial onboarding really tight, because what we're trying to do is keep, for lack of a better term, the noise level down, right? We want to have a very close interaction with these folks. We want to manage their onboarding, get feedback from them, and rapidly iterate on their feedback. As we address their issues, a couple of things will happen. One, we will provide documentation, actionable documentation, like here are the things you need to know. We feel that we've given out really extensive documentation about what 2.0 is from a design perspective, how it works. But then there's a very specific subset of changes when you think about, well, what does this mean for me, right? I'm running this application on the Casper network. What do I need to do in order to be prepared for Condor? And so that is the kind of documentation that's going to come out of this early engagement with these folks, right? And then after that, after we get through the upgrade point and all the existing apps are compatible and everything is looking good, then we can start talking about what are some of the new features? How do you take advantage of these new features, right? Because there are new features in 2.0 that we obviously want everybody to take advantage of right up, as soon as possible. But that's going to require some development work. And what our first goal is to bring the ecosystem along with the launch of 2.0. And, to that end, we have a very extensive rollout plan that we are developing in collaboration with the Casper Association that comprises of outreach to all the exchanges, outreach to the validators, outreach to infrastructure providers, outreach to dApps and grantees with this information to help bring the entire ecosystem along. And so the first piece of load-bearing work there is the JavaScript SDK. The DevNet is up and running. Joe is testing against it, and the team is working with it, but it's not yet ready for us to bring Make and others on board until the JS SDK is ready to go. So I don't know if there's any questions around that piece. Moving along, I'll share with you real quickly. I know a lot of people are curious, about the fee elimination feature. Basically, Casper will not necessarily go gasless, but it's not going to really cost you. So I'm just going to share this with you briefly so people can understand the kind of analysis we're doing. This is not ready. This is not final, but this is just to kind of, lift up the covers and let you guys see, the kind of analysis we're performing to really try to understand, potential attack vectors and what does the fee elimination model look like with respects to, adverse actors versus user experience, right? And I think there's a fine line between, making the protocol secure and making the protocol usable, right? There's a lot of things that go into that. We need to be sensitive to, what the user experience needs to be in terms of people being able to understand what the unlock duration is. Our desire is to keep it very simple, so it's not, difficult for people to understand when their CSPR will be unlocked. By the same token, we need to keep it secure and make sure that the system doesn't become prohibitive when the system is under legitimate load. So what does that number look like in terms of the gas market? So it's not black and white. These are very much gray things. And I know the community is really hungry to understand, what are the implications and the ergonomics of fee elimination. And I promise you, we're working on it. We just want to be thoughtful in our approach and make sure that we get it right as we communicate. And then, the other piece that we're working on a lot is our roadmap. What is next for Casper? And from my perspective, there's the most important thing we need to focus on once 2.0 lands is going to be performance, right? Our goal has been for the past year and a half to consistently drive down what I call latency. That means the time to finality, block times, also known as block times. And we have a bold ambition that with Condor, we want to get to 8-second block times. It's an aggressive goal, but I believe we'll be able to hit it. And after we get to the latency number, we have a lot more flexibility with Zug, right? The new consensus protocol isn't going to force us to half the block time. We can then go from 8 seconds to 7 seconds if we desire to, 7 seconds to 6 seconds. It gives us that flexibility. But the other piece we want to start looking at then is throughput, right? And being able to put more computation in each block. And so that brings us to one of the high priority items that the Casper Association, our Mache Pappy, we call him Pappy, has been working on for quite some time. Pappy's been working on this probably 9 months, I would say 6 to 9 months, is the alternate virtual machine, right? So a new runtime that will be faster. So once we address highway, the next slowest piece in the system is going to be the virtual machine, right? Once we remove the highway issue and gone to Zug, which is more efficient, then we need to turn our attention to the virtual machine. And that's what we're doing. So we are excited. A lot of the work in 2.0 includes abstracting away, create an abstraction layer to allow a new virtual machine to be introduced. So in a 2.x release, our intention is to release an alternate virtual machine based on Wasmer. And so this is going to be really exciting. Not making any promises because we haven't tested it, but I'm optimistic that it's going to be faster than parity Wasm, simply because it won't be an interpreted runtime, right? So it'll be a lot faster. And yeah, I mean, that's the big focus is performance, right? Latency and throughput. The Casper Association will be releasing that roadmap soon. There's a lot of really cool work that they're doing, not the least of which is the R&D work that Mark Greenslade is heading up, in addition to the core protocol work and a bunch of work on the ecosystem around interoperability and bridges and other great stuff on the infrastructure side. So I'll turn it back over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Mel. Just going to jump in here. Joe Davis here. We got a question in the chat I wanted to bring attention to from Marche, which is how many deploys per block? And also, will there be some enterprises using the public chain by 2024, or will Casper remain in development?
Well, Casper's going to stay in development. Like Casper's development is really orthogonal to enterprises using it, right? Enterprises are used and actually want software that's maintained, right? They don't want software that's not going to be maintained. And that's one of the value propositions of Casper is, you know, it's modular and it allows us to take advantage of new technologies that are coming up in the space and new technological innovations. And enterprises fully expect that software is actively maintained. So I would say that absolutely Casper is going to remain in development, and enterprises adopting it has more to do with the regulatory environment than it necessarily does with Casper, like to be perfectly clear. And then kind of double clicking in on Mache's question about how many deploys per block. Well, that isn't a straightforward answer, right? And the reason it's not a straightforward answer is blocks are limited by a variety of parameters. It's not limited by just by deploys. And I think when we go into this and we start talking about that way, it's a gross oversimplification of a very complicated system. And, you know, you always, I mean, there is a desire to be able to speak about how many transactions and what the throughput is, but you also want to be truthful and you want to be concise when you talk about it, right? And so blocks are limited by the amount of computation that can happen. That's the gas limit. And then blocks are also limited by, you know, a limit that we place on it by the number of transactions depending on their type that is allowed in a block. And it's a combination of multiple parameters, right? Some transactions like token transfers are trivial from a computation perspective, so we can have more of them. Other transactions are very intensive, such as a contract install, so we can have fewer of them. And depending on what gets sent, you would see a certain number of transactions in a block, right? And each lane has a maximum, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's the block maximum. So I know everybody really wants me to say, this is how many transactions in a block, but it really isn't that simple, unfortunately.
Thank you, Medha. I'll pass it back over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe, for keeping us updated on the questions here in the chat and organizing that. Thank you, Medha, for that feedback and clarification. Please keep your questions coming either on the slides link here or also in the in-call messages, and we'll get to those. If there's nothing else, I'd love to hand it over to Michael Steuer from Make, who is here to give us some exciting updates on the suite of Casper products that they've been working on, and many of you are probably very familiar with them. So Michael, I'll hand it over to you to give us any updates.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's always a pleasure to join these calls. So I'll provide an update on the CSPR product suite. I realize that we're sort of slowly running out of time, or quickly running out of time, so I'll try to be a little faster about it. I think most of the people on the call are aware of all the components in the suite. As you know, we focus essentially on two constituencies, retail and developers, with a similar objective, essentially making Casper blockchain easier and user-friendlier to use, whether you're a retail user or a developer. We'll dig into some of these tools here in this update and specifically around what's new for them and what's coming. So Casper Live, the Block Explorer, I think I talked about this in a previous call as well. We recently launched a pretty comprehensive interface for managing associated keys or multi-sig accounts. It allows you to easily create or basically turn any account into a multi-sig account. And then we've added a UI around the management of multi-sig transactions. Specifically in the context of CSPR.live, that means like things like transfers and deploys and delegations and sort of the types of transactions that we support through the web wallet component of CSPR.live. But what we're also doing is we're going to abstract this this user experience, this UI, and make it available as a component for others to use. Because what we've learned in implementing this is that there are a lot of sort of edge cases that you need to handle in this experience, and we want to make sure that the ecosystem is able to tackle those as well. Because obviously the multi-sig functionality is extremely powerful, but it's also prone to user error if you don't put guardrails around the edge cases, which could be catastrophic loss of access to accounts. We are providing on the right, you see a reverse lookup, essentially. So the protocol already allows you to see of a multi-sig account who is permitted to sign on its behalf, so who's associated with it. We are maintaining a reverse lookup so that you as a account holder get to see which other accounts you are authorized to sign on behalf of. So if you initiate a multi-sig transaction, you can choose to do that on your own behalf, or you can choose to do that on behalf of any of the accounts you're authorized for. And finally, we're working on in-app notifications, push notifications, which will really sort of complete the user experience loop, where rather than passing around a URL, which is the current case, right? Like you get a deploy URL where others need to also sign the transaction. In the near future, you'll be able to essentially start a multi-sig transaction, and all the other participants in the transaction will be notified that there's a signature request waiting for them to sign, which will really improve the user experience. And this will be available to essentially anyone using the CSPR infrastructure. Then more recent updates to CSPR.live, or actually this is about to go live in the next 1 or 2 weeks. So we're taking, we're improving the user friendliness of deploy information. So in the past, we would show basically what the deploy on the protocol shows. And as you may recall, there was this table of transfers below a deploy, which would show internal transfers, and was never really clear what was actually happening. We're trying to split that out into sort of more human readable and understandable text between the action that was done. So if you look at the screen, this is the example. This is an example of a transfer deploy. The action was that this account transferred 6 CSPR to that public key. And now we're showing the results, which was the movement of actually 6 CSPR to from this account to that account. So this is obviously a straightforward example. This can get pretty complex once you get into DeFi transactions, where you see tokens moving and being bridged and being burned, etc., between multiple accounts and currencies, etc. Some more examples. This is a delegation transaction. Somebody performed the action of delegating 500 CSPR to StakePire in this case. The result of doing that is that actually 500 CSPR moved from their account into the auction pool. Another example, somebody accepted an offer on CSPR Studio for a specific NFT, and it was accepted by this public key. And again, results are the movement of a payment from one account to another. As you can see, this is more of a deploy overview. It just becomes a lot more understandable what's going on. Essentially, in all the deploy tables, you can see more specifically exactly what happens. Casper Wallet, and that's why we'll switch to the simulator soon. Some of the latest features that I want to highlight. We launched in-app staking. I won't demo this quite yet, but towards the end we'll get to a demo. Which in the past you had to use CSPR Live within the Casper wallet in order to maintain your stake. Now everything is available. So essentially Casper Wallet has become a standalone environment where you can do anything and everything without any companion application as well. This has been an often made request. So Casper Wallet is based on HD wallets, meaning you derive additional keys based on your seed phrase, your recovery phrase. There are circumstances where you may want to have a downloadable private key file for a specific derived public key, which is now something that we allow. So for even if you generate dozens of wallets from your seed phrase, and you need to, for example, use a private key file in a server application or import it somewhere, you can now export that specific account into a file. Another often made request, since the Taurus wallet is let's say lagging behind in maintenance. There have been a lot of requests of Taurus users wanting to move their account over to Casper Wallet. Taurus doesn't really provide a straightforward export functionality, but they do have a sort of encoded private key that you can export. So we've added a functionality to Casper Wallet where you can easily import your Taurus private key and then move off of Taurus essentially. We continuously, both in Casper Click as well as Casper Wallet, integrate with the new on-ramp providers that join the Casper ecosystem. Initially, we had Topper by Upholds. Now we also have Ramp, and we're working with the third one that currently escapes me on integrating as well. Once you have more than one, you essentially need to provide a little bit more UX around it to allow the user to have the information they need to choose the one that suits their needs, right? So we now have a user experience built in where you can indicate, first of all, which country you're based and how much CSPR you're looking to purchase. And then based on those choices, it'll tell you, well, these are the providers that are available in your country or in your jurisdiction, because not everybody has the same licenses, et cetera, et cetera. And then based on the amount, this is essentially how much you'll end up getting from each provider, and then based on that, you can choose which one to make the purchase with. Then deep linking. So this is something that we actually just added in the past week, and it's another showcase of why combining as a developer Casper Wallet and Casper Click, using Casper Click as the integration rather than trying to go at it yourself, is so powerful, because any application that now uses Casper Click, and I will show an example here, CSPR.shopping, which is also something that a partner of ours recently launched. And just real quickly to explain what it is, CSPR shopping is a way of getting CSPR cash back on purchases from hundreds of retailers. So if you are in the market to, well, let's use the example here on the home screen, you want to buy a new shirt at Banana Republic or Gap. If you do it through CSPR.shopping, you will get, as it says here, up to 2.4% of your purchase back in CSPR straight to your wallet. And this can be paid with any credit card or any payment method. So if you have other rewards on your credit card, you're actually doubling up on your credit card, on your rewards as well. Anyways, that was just an example. So CSPR shopping has used CSPR Click to integrate with the ecosystem. So normally when you have this experience on mobile, and as most of you will know or will see in your own analytics, probably around 50% or more of your users are using your app on mobile. You get these choices, but it's very hard to actually support sort of in native browser signing and other functionality on platforms like iOS and Android. So a user would click Casper Wallet, and then it would say, well, you have to like download Casper Wallet or some other, or open this in the in-app browser in Casper Wallet, and that obviously is frictionful, as Mel would put it. With deep linking, what happens is the following. So I click Casper Wallet, and now Casper Wallet automatically opens and loads where I left off. And here I am signed in. Pretty straightforward. So as a user, this has become frictionless, where with a simple click, I can continue my app experience in the wallet, coming from the native browser on the mobile device. So that essentially solves the problem of running dApps in mobile device browsers, because you can simply continue the experience completely frictionless within the in-app browser environment of the Casper wallet, and all your accounts are available. And if I want to switch accounts, it's a matter of clicking around in the wallet, etc. That was the part of the demo that I wanted to show. If there are questions later about any of the other functionality, I have the simulator open, so we can look at some of these other functions as well. I'll keep going. CSPR.name. So we've talked about this in the past, actually quite a bit, and I think in the last community call that I was on, I promised that we would have information about launch date and more details by the next community call. I'm going to admit here that I'm going to miss that promise by about 24 hours, because there will be a announcement going out tomorrow. So the tease here, I guess, is watch the news or watch the channels tomorrow for details on CSPR.name, and it'll be interesting. And obviously, what we do with CSPR.name is always designed or intended to be available to all the developers in the ecosystem. So it'll be broadly supported through the middleware and other functions as well. Casper development ecosystem. So just a quick rundown of what's new in CSPR.click and CSPR.cloud. And I realize I'm running up against time, so I'll go real quick. Basically reminder of where things sit. So in Web3 architecture, unlike Web2, essentially users interact directly with the storage layer, right, with the blockchain, versus going through an application. And it's asynchronous. So you make a request, it gets processed in a block, and then you need to observe the results. Casper Click sits on the request side. It enables users to interact with the blockchain. Casper Cloud sits on the observation side. It allows dApps to observe what happens on the blockchain. Casper Cloud. I'm going to skip through this real quickly, because I think most of you are either familiar or already using CSPR.cloud. What's new is that since launch, we have completed the real-time streaming interface, meaning that when we launched or came out of beta, only contract-level events could be streamed. Now, essentially, all entities on the blockchain can be streamed via WebSockets, meaning you can subscribe to real-time notifications for any on-chain entity type, and get the payloads whenever an event occurs around them, sent to you via WebSocket in JSON. We've updated the REST API to allow filtering by block height range, which was also an often requested feature. Essentially, for those who are not using real-time streaming but are polling, this will allow them to limit the range that they're polling the API with. What's next? CSPR.name integration, more details to follow. And as Medha mentioned earlier, we're already looking at the RPC documentation for Condor, and we are expecting to work quite a bit on getting CSPR Cloud Condor compatible. And since most of the ecosystem uses CSPR.cloud to observe the blockchain, we want to make sure that ideally we provide full backward compatibility, meaning that if you are a dApp who's using CSPR.cloud and Condor launches, your app just keeps working. So that's the objective. In the next weeks, we'll find out to what extent that's possible. CSPR.click. That's the single SDK that allows you to integrate every wallet in the ecosystem with a single SDK, add fiat on-ramps to your apps, and have an SSO experience that makes it extremely easy for end users to connect with your app. And now, as you saw, adds the deep linking functionality to any app that uses it as well. We recently launched, or not we recently launched, Astronomica recently launched Beast League. Many of you might have played the game already. The Web3 experience, the Casper experience in it is entirely powered by CSPR.click. It uses a custom-built CSPR.click-based web wallet for Beast League. We're working on preparing a general use one of the web wallets, so that everybody can use that in their project as well. So if you're a developer who hasn't really started developing on a CSPR.click or CSPR.cloud yet, or you have a while ago, but you had to deal with us directly in order to get your app IDs and things like that, there is now CSPR.build. So there are two components to CSPR.build. One is console.CSPR.build, where you can sign up or log into your organization's accounts and generate and maintain your CSPR.cloud keys, your CSPR.click keys, and as an organization with multiple developers, perhaps you can add and remove and assign rights to your users. So this makes the CSPR developer environment entirely self-service. So it's really sort of a platform as a service now, where you can sign up and maintain your organization, your keys, your rights, eventually payments for premium services, notifications, etc. So check out console.cspr.build if you haven't yet, but it's extremely easy to get started there. And then the second part is docs.cspr.build. We realize that we have a lot of docs flying around for the different components in the CSPR suite, as well as other things, SDKs that we maintain, etc. So we try to centralize that into a developer portal where we make available essentially all the docs. So you'll find here links into the CSPR.click documentation, CSPR.cloud documentation, the Casper wallet documentation, our public roadmaps for the various products, as well as soon to follow examples and sort of kitchen sink applications, if you will, that tie it all together so that you can pull out examples for your own development. That's what I have for you today. I know we're slightly over time, but happy to answer any questions.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Michael. I'll leave it to Joe Davies to collect any questions we have to follow up with. But just a reminder, our call has been recorded, so we will have a recap of all of the great information that's been shared today. We will have a Casper blog on the Casper.network website that we'll have a follow-up on with links that have been shared in this call. So it's a great way to catch up on anything you might have missed or want to go over some key insights from today's discussions. So I want to thank everybody for contributing today. Thank you, Michael, for all the great new updates on the CSPR suite of products. Lots of great activity. Thank you, Ed Hastings, for participating today as well, and Medha, Mel Padden as well, and Ralph Kubley. We will do this call again 4 weeks from today, so this will be a regular call. I'm happy and appreciate everybody's turnout today as we've transitioned from the Discord community call to give you a more dynamic opportunity to engage with the core team here at Casper. We will continue to keep you updated across our other channels as well. In 2 weeks, we have a broader conversation to participate in on our X channel. So feel free to follow us on X and LinkedIn as well. Yeah, your presence makes our community that much more dynamic. So appreciate everybody for attending today. If there aren't any questions, Joe, do you have any questions from the Google Slides? as well.
No questions at the moment.
Excellent.
We do have a question that's just coming from Marche. Is the recording going to be published on the official YouTube? Not sure about that. Joe, do you have the answer to that one?
So we will probably have a version of this recording on YouTube, but we will definitely have highlights as a blog and like I said, links that have been shared on this call as well to follow up on, including as Mel had suggested, the best place to connect with more technical conversations will be the Casper Dev Connect Telegram channel, which we have not shared in this call yet, but it will be included in the Casper blog as well. So stay tuned for that. If you're not already a part of that, we will be sharing that as a public link for everybody to join in on. So thanks for that question, Mache. Thank you for the offer to add subtitles, and Mache, great content on your own as a Casper enthusiast and dare to say Casper Maxi. So appreciate your content as well, Mache. So if there's nothing else, I want to thank everybody again for joining today. We will do this again in 4 weeks, and stay tuned for updates on how to join and other opportunities to get involved. And thanks everybody for presenting today. Lots of great information, and great that we can dive deeper on the Casper technical calls here. So thanks again.